They never wanted you to read the Book of Enoch. They never wanted you to open those ancient pages and see a reflection of yourself, your struggle, your divinity, your royalty. That book was buried, hidden away for centuries. Not because it was false, but because it was too true, too revealing, too dangerous to the systems built on keeping you ignorant of your power. You see, when you open the Book of Enoch, you're not just reading old words. You're stepping into a forgotten mirror that shows you who you really are. And if you're a black man, a black woman, a child of the African diaspora, then listen closely, because this book matters to you more than you've ever been told. They took it out of the Bible. Ask yourself why. Why would a book quoted by Peter, referenced by Jude, and well known to early Christians be cast aside, labeled non-canonical, apocryphal, uninspired? It's because the Book of Enoch reveals a story so ancient, so celestial, and so deeply tied to Africa that it shakes the very foundation of what we've been taught in churches, schools, and pulpits. This isn't about conspiracies. This is about clarity, about connecting the dots between ancient texts and modern truths, about restoring the bridge between a spiritual past and a divine destiny. The Book of Enoch speaks of angels who descended upon Mount Hermon. It describes watchers, heavenly beings who defied divine order and came down to the daughters of men. But this isn't just mythology, it's a key to understanding the spiritual warfare still raging today. These watchers taught forbidden knowledge, gave mankind weapons, sorcery, vanity, and deception. Sound familiar? Think about how your community has been flooded with tools of destruction masked as advancement, drugs, guns, corruption, all things introduced, not born from you. The Book of Enoch calls out this ancient infiltration. And when you realize the origin of the oppression, you begin to understand how to rise above it. But this isn't just about evil, it's also about identity. Do you know where the Book of Enoch comes from? Ethiopia, that's right, Africa. This book wasn't found in Rome. It wasn't discovered in Paris. It survived in the mountains of Ethiopia, preserved by people who look like you. The same land where the Ark of the Covenant is said to reside. The same land where Enoch, Noah, and even Jesus are honored not just as religious figures, but as family, lineage, bloodline. Do you feel that? The ground shaking under your feet? That's the weight of forgotten history rising again. Enoch was a black man. He walked with God. That's what the Bible says. Not just followed, not just worshiped. He walked with God side by side. So favored that he was taken, translated into heaven without ever tasting death. That's not just holiness, that's excellence. That's what it means to be chosen, to carry divine DNA. If Enoch is your ancestor, then you, my brother, my sister, carry that same spark, that same favor, that same calling. But they told you your history began with slavery, that your legacy started in chains. No, your legacy began with the stars, with the heaven, with one who walked with God before there was a cross, before there was a crown of thorns, before there was a Roman Empire. Your story began with Enoch. And it matters because this generation is asleep, distracted, plugged into a system designed to keep you blind to your work. But when you read the Book of Enoch, you're not just reading prophecy, you're waking up. It speaks of the great judgment, the day when truth can no longer be silenced. It speaks of a Messiah, a Son of Man, who would rise in the last days to bring justice to the oppressed. Sound familiar? The Book of Enoch described Christ in detail, hundreds of years before he walked the earth. And that should make you pause. Because how could a so-called non-biblical book be so accurate, so precise, so full of revelation that even demons tremble at its word? Because the truth always finds a way. And here's where it hits home. The Book of Enoch describes a remnant, a people chosen, a people scattered across nations, oppressed, forgotten, but never forsaken. And when you look at the state of black people around the world, whether in America, the Caribbean, Brazil, or the streets of Lagos, you begin to see the pattern of royal people living in a fallen system, a divine people caught in generational trauma, A powerful people with their history stripped, their names changed, their books banned. But the Book of Enoch was preserved for you. You want to know who you are? Open it. You want to know why your spirit has always felt out of place in this world? Read it, because in those pages you'll find answers to questions your soul has been whispering since birth. Questions like, why do I feel like I'm more than what they say I am? Why does the system seem designed to break me? Why do I keep surviving things that should have destroyed me? It's because there's a calling on your life. There's prophecy in your bloodline. There's power in your ancestry. The Book of Enoch lifts the veil. It shows that the enemy's plan is ancient, calculated, and spiritual. It reveals that the wars we fight aren't just physical, they're cosmic principalities, powers. And once you understand that, you stop blaming yourself. You stop blaming your brother. You stop blaming your sister. And you start fighting the right battle in the right way with the right weapons. Knowledge, faith, truth. Enoch named the fallen ones, exposed them, declared their judgment. That's what you're called to do, to expose the lie and stand for truth. That's why black voices are attacked when they speak out. That's why your history is whitewashed. That's why your books are banned, your prophets silenced, your movements infiltrated. Because the spirit of Enoch still lives in you, and it terrifies the enemy. You are not forgotten. You are not lost. You are not cursed. You are chosen. You are royal. You are called to rise. And when you reclaim these ancient books, when you reclaim your stolen history, when you realize that the earliest patriarchs, the ones who walked with God, heard from angels, received visions and dreams, were your ancestors, everything changes. Your posture changes. Your walk changes. Your prayers change. Because now you pray from a place of power. So what do you do with this? You don't just read it and move on. You study it. You live it. You teach it to your children. You wake up your community. You rise up in truth, and you reject the lie that you were ever less than. Because you were never less. You were hidden, like gold in the dirt, like a treasure buried deep. But now it's time to dig. It's time to uncover. It's time to return to the roots of your spiritual DNA. The Book of Enoch matters to black people because it reconnects the disconnected. It brings light to the shadow. It restores the honor of a people whose truth was buried with chains and oppression. But truth never dies. Truth resurrects, truth endures. And now it's calling you back to who you really are. Not just a believer, not just a fighter, but a king, a queen, a prophet, a light in the darkness. The Book of Enoch matters because it reminds you that God never forgot about you, that your name is still written in heaven, that no matter how long the exile, no matter how painful the journey, restoration is coming, judgment is coming, victory is coming, and it starts when you wake up. When you open your eyes and realize this book was never just a book. It was a message sent across time. A love letter from heaven to a people scattered, to a people wounded, to a people rising. You are that people, and now that you know, what will you do with it? The story of Enoch is more than just a tale in an ancient scroll. It's a reflection of a divine connection that breaks through time, race, and history. When the text says that Enoch walked with God, it wasn't just telling us about a holy man. It was revealing a blueprint, a model for relationship, a message to those who feel forgotten, scattered, broken. That kind of favor, that kind of closeness, that kind of spiritual bond, it's not a fairy tale. It's a promise. And for black people around the world who have been told they're less than, who've been made to believe they are far from God, this message hits differently. It says, not only are you not far, you've always been close. The walk didn't end with Enoch. It continues through you. See, Enoch didn't just worship. He didn't just obey. He walked with God. That means step for step. That means in rhythm, in alignment, in purpose. And that walk was so pure, so powerful, that God took him. He didn't die. He was translated, elevated, transcendent. And that matters, because if a man from ancient Africa could walk in such harmony with the Creator, then who told you it wasn't possible for you? Who convinced you that spiritual power was something reserved for others? That holiness had a look, a color, a region? The truth is, the same spirit that moved Enoch still moves today. And it's not bound by skin, it's awakened by truth. What's even more powerful is that Enoch's story has been buried, just like so much of black history. It was edited out, pushed aside, treated like myth. But you can't erase destiny. You can't silence legacy. The fact that the Book of Enoch survived through Ethiopia is not coincidence. It's preservation. It's protection. The same God who walked with Enoch ensured his story would make its way back to the people who need it most today. To the sons and daughters of Africa who've had their story rewritten, their names stripped, their royalty denied. But now the pages are being reopened, and they're speaking louder than ever. When you understand that Enoch was one of your ancestors, that this story is your spiritual heritage, your entire worldview shifts. You start praying differently. You start walking with confidence, because you're not just someone trying to find God. You're someone invited to walk with Him, like a friend, like a partner, like family. That's what Enoch had, and that's what you can reclaim. And let's be real, there's a reason so many young black men and women feel spiritually disconnected. Because the images, the churches, the doctrines, they were shaped in ways that excluded you, made you feel like you had to climb your way up to God, instead of realizing He already came walking toward you. The Book of Enoch restores that truth, that you've always been part of the plan, that divine relationship has always been in your bloodline. You see, Enoch represents more than a man. He symbolizes access, authority, alignment. And when you, a descendant of kings and prophets, understand that something ignites. That walk is not just about holiness, it's about healing. Healing from lies that told you your skin disqualified you. Healing from trauma that made you feel abandoned. Healing from generations of silence. Because walking with God means you're never alone. It means you're not invisible. It means you're seen, heard, and called. This is why the story of Enoch matters now more than ever. Because a generation is rising that doesn't want empty religion. They want real relationship. They want something that speaks to the depths of who they are. And Enoch's life says it's possible. You can walk in wisdom, in revelation, in favor. You can rise beyond the limitations placed on you. Because your ancestors didn't just survive. They walked with the Most High. So ask yourself, what would it look like if you walked with God like Enoch did? If every step you took was led by purpose? If you stopped seeing yourself through the lens of struggle and started seeing yourself through the eyes of the Creator? That's not fantasy. That's your inheritance. The same God who walked with Enoch is waiting to walk with you. Not behind you, not ahead of you, with you. That kind of walk changes everything. And once you realize it's your birthright, you never walk the same again. They often told the world that Africa was only a shadow in the background of history, mentioned once, maybe twice in passing. A place of wilderness, not wisdom. But the truth is far more powerful than the lie, because when the world tried to erase the roots, Africa protected them. When the truth was being edited, redacted, and hidden, it was the mountains of Ethiopia that held on to what others wanted to forget. The Book of Enoch didn't survive because it was accepted by the West. It survived because Africa refused to let it die. And that matters. That's not a side note. That's a central truth. Because it means that Africa wasn't just mentioned in the story, it was chosen to preserve it. People talk about biblical preservation like it happened only in Rome, only in Europe, only in places far removed from the lands where the prophets actually walked. But the Book of Enoch tells a different story. It wasn't found among Vatican archives. It wasn't uncovered in the cathedrals of France. It was kept safe in Ethiopia, guarded by people who looked like you. People who knew that their connection to the Creator didn't start with colonization. Their relationship with God went back to the beginning. They didn't need approval to hold sacred texts. They already knew their worth, and that sacred knowledge wasn't just buried. It was read, it was lived, it was passed down from one generation to the next. While other regions tried to silence the book, Africa read it aloud. While councils debated its worth, Ethiopia kept it alive. That act alone speaks volumes, because it means that black people are not just part of the biblical story. They are protectors of the truth, guardians of the original word. That should change how you see yourself. You're not on the outside looking in. You've been holding the keys all along. The survival of the Book of Enoch in Ethiopia is not an accident. It's divine strategy. It's proof that even when the world wants to bury something holy, God places it in the hands of a people strong enough to guard it. And those hands were African hands. That land was African soil. And when the time came, when the world was finally ready to hear what had been hidden for generations, it was Africa that handed it back. Not with arrogance, but with quiet authority, like a keeper returning what was lost. There's a reason the ancient churches of Lalibela were carved from stone. A reason why monks walked for days to study scrolls in the highlands. A reason why even in the midst of colonization, Africa still held on to its scriptures. Because Africa was never just a setting in the story. It was the safe house. It was the archive. It was the living library of sacred truth. And when you understand that, you understand why the African presence in Scripture has been downplayed, dismissed, and diluted. Because if people realized that Africa preserved the word while others distorted it, the narrative would have to shift, and shifting narratives threatens control. This is why it's so important for black people around the world to reclaim this knowledge. Because if your ancestors were trusted with safeguarding a divine book like Enoch, then you come from a lineage of wisdom. You come from people chosen to carry the secrets of heaven. That's not mythology. That's history. That's identity. And it means your connection to the Creator didn't begin in a slave ship. It began in the garden, in the wilderness, on the mountains, in the sacred spaces of a continent whose spiritual wealth is deeper than gold. They've taught for so long that your story began in shackles, as if the first cry from your people echoed in the belly of a slave ship. As if your history was born in bondage, in pain, in chains. But that's not the truth. That's not the root. That's not where your journey began. Before the ships, before the auctions, before the trauma, there was something sacred, something cosmic, something divine. Your history didn't begin at the bottom of someone else's boat. It began in the heavens. It began when God breathed purpose into a people and set them apart. A story written not in chains, but in stars. The Book of Enoch is one of the ancient texts that exposes this truth. It lifts the curtain on a part of your heritage that the world tried to bury. It shows that the story of your ancestors wasn't limited to struggle, but tied to a heavenly calling. Enoch, a man from the lineage of Adam, a man from the early chapters of creation, didn't just follow the rules. He walked with the Creator. And he did it with such purity, such spiritual alignment, that he didn't even taste death. He was taken, elevated, rewarded. That tells you something about the level of intimacy and favor God has always had for his chosen. And if Enoch was part of your ancestry, and many signs point directly to this, then your roots are not in oppression, they are in glory. See, this matters because identity drives destiny. If a person believes they come from nothing, they'll act like they're worth nothing. But if someone knows their origin is wrapped in purpose, written by the Creator, spoken before time began, then they'll walk with their head high, shoulders square, eyes forward. You didn't come from scratch. You came from sacred soil, from divine knowledge, from a spiritual legacy that traces all the way back to the foundations of the world. Enoch wrote about the heavens. He spoke of angels, of divine order, of cosmic wisdom that stretches beyond the stars. And the fact that this knowledge was preserved in Africa is not just historical, it's prophetic. It's a signal that black people were never meant to be the footnotes of history. You are the authors of wisdom, the carriers of revelation, the ones entrusted to protect what was holy when the world turned its back on it. That truth isn't just inspiring, it's essential. Because the lie that your story began with slavery was never meant to empower you. It was meant to reduce you. But now the truth is resurfacing and it cannot be stopped. Think about the power in this before there was ever a European empire, before there was a transatlantic route, before the first shackle was ever forged. There were African people who stood in the presence of God, who carried scrolls, who interpreted dreams, who built kingdoms not just with stone but with spirit. That's what the Book of Enoch reveals. That's what they don't want you to know. Because once you see yourself through that lens, through the lens of original greatness, everything changes. Your worship changes. Your mindset changes. Your future opens up. This is about more than just correcting history. It's about healing. Because when people are told that they come from nothing but chains, they inherit trauma. But when they discover they come from the stars, they inherit purpose. And the world has seen what happens when black people begin to wake up to that purpose. It can't be controlled. It can't be silenced. It begins to speak from every corner of the earth, through art, through music, through revelation, through action. And it all points back to the truth that was hidden for so long. The reason the Book of Enoch was removed from most canons wasn't because it was false. It was because it was too true. It showed too much. It pulled back the veil on spiritual warfare, on divine order, on prophetic destiny. And most of all, it reminded a people of their divine link to heaven. That kind of knowledge is dangerous to systems built on control. But you were never meant to be controlled. You were meant to lead, to speak, to rise. So when they try to teach you that you come from nothing, remember Enoch. Remember the man who walked with God and never saw death. Remember that his writings were preserved in a land filled with people who look like you. Remember that your connection to the divine is not new. It's ancient. It's powerful. It's written in your spiritual. You didn't begin with chains. You began with a call, a heavenly assignment, a cosmic inheritance. And it's time to reclaim that truth. Not for pride, but for purpose. Not to look down on others, but to finally stand in your rightful place. Because once you realize that your roots stretch beyond slavery, beyond colonization, beyond the brokenness of recent history, once you remember that they reach into the stars, then you start to live like someone who was always meant to shine. They didn't remove the Book of Enoch because it lacked meaning. They didn't cast it aside because it didn't line up with truth. They hid it because it told too much. It pulled back the curtain on things they didn't want you to see. It showed the reality of spiritual realms, the conflict between the heavenly and the fallen, and it exposed the role of humankind in that struggle. It gave too much power to the reader. It told the truth about divine judgment, about angelic rebellion, about the secrets of the heavens, and it reminded you who you really are. That's what made it dangerous. Because when a person remembers their true identity, no chain, no system, no doctrine can hold them down. The Book of Enoch wasn't dismissed by accident. Its removal was intentional, calculated, because it carries truths that awaken the soul, open the eyes, and shake the systems built on silence. It dares to explain how knowledge was corrupted, how the fallen sought to mimic the holy, how generations were deceived. And most of all, it points to a people of dark skin, people of ancient lands who were witnesses to these events. Not just passive observers, but participants. That kind of truth doesn't sit well with those rewriting history to erase your reflection. It had to be hidden, because it confirmed what they tried to deny, that you were always a part of the divine plan. This text doesn't just mention angels, it doesn't just talk about judgment, it lays out the reasons why the earth groaned under corruption. And the corruption came not just from men, but from beings that were supposed to remain loyal to the heavens. When Enoch was shown these visions, he didn't write them for himself. He wrote them for a future generation. A generation that would live in the time of deception. A generation that would need to remember who they are. That generation is now. You are the ones he saw. You are the reason his words matter so much today. Because the things hidden from the world are being revealed again, not by the approval of institutions, but by divine timing. They didn't want you to read a book that explains how technology, vanity, warfare, and even injustice were introduced by rebellious watchers. They didn't want you to see how those same forces still shape the systems that oppress you today. Enoch wrote about it long before our modern times. That's how clear and timeless the truth is. That's how deep the connection is between the ancient battle and the modern struggle. It's all connected, and if you start seeing that connection, you also start seeing that you were never powerless. You were just kept from the knowledge that made you powerful. There's something unsettling about a book that tells the truth about fallen angels and their influence on the world. It challenges the neat, watered-down version of faith many have grown comfortable with. But it also reveals that the fight you feel every day, the battle in your spirit, the confusion, the resistance, it's not just life being hard, it's a war. And in that war, you are not a bystander. You are a target, yes, but also a warrior. Enoch doesn't just explain the darkness, it confirms that the righteous are not forgotten. It shows that even when the world is overrun with chaos, the Most High remembers those who walk with Him. That's why the book had to be taken out of public sight, because it doesn't create followers, it wakes up leaders. It doesn't feed fear, it stirs up courage. It gives you insight into why the world is the way it is, and why some truths were buried deep beneath layers of confusion. When you realize that when it finally sinks in that the truth was hidden not because it was wrong, but because it was too right, you begin to ask different questions. You begin to search, not with doubt, but with determination. And what you find will change the way you see yourself forever. The people who preserved this book, the ones who knew its value, didn't have global platforms. They didn't have publishing power. But they had something greater, divine conviction. They held on to it because they knew its words carried the breath of heaven. And now those words are finding their way back into the hands of those who were denied access for too long. You, your family, your people. And it's not too late, because the Most High never forgot you. He let the truth rest until the time was right for it to rise again. This book tells us that judgment is coming. Yes, but it also tells us that the righteous will shine. That those who are mocked, oppressed, misused, overlooked, they will be lifted up. That's a message the enemy never wanted you to believe. That's a hope the world tried to delete. But here it is again, louder than before. Enoch spoke not just to his time, but to the generations after him. And if you're hearing this now, it's not by coincidence. It's because the time has come for you to see, to rise, and to reclaim the truth that once was hidden for your sake. You've been told your story is one of being cast aside, always on the outside, looking in. You've been shown images that portray you as forgotten, as left behind, as a footnote in someone else's narrative, but that image is not the truth. What the world called rejection was really preservation. What they thought was silence was actually strategy. You weren't abandoned, you were set apart. Set apart for a reason. Set apart for a time like this. Because what they called delay was actually destiny. And the Book of Enoch is one of the loudest confirmations of that hidden plan. All throughout history, the world painted a picture of greatness as something that had to come from the West, from palaces, from politics, from power, but the Most High doesn't operate according to man's ideas. He always works from the margins. He chooses what the world overlooks. He raises up those considered low. The story of the remnant isn't about being lesser, it's about being reserved for a greater purpose. And black people globally are not outside of prophecy. They are woven into its very core. You're not a mistake in the plan. You are the sign of it. The Book of Enoch holds a truth that has been quietly resting, waiting to be rediscovered. It wasn't kept in the halls of European institutions. It wasn't protected by the same hands that erased so much of your history. It was kept alive in Ethiopia, a land that many have tried to keep disconnected from the biblical record, though it has always been one of the most sacred places in the story. The survival of that book on African soil speaks volumes, because when knowledge is too sacred for manipulation, it must be guarded by those who still understand reverence. This isn't just about recovering an old manuscript. This is about recognizing that your ancestors were not just caught in history, they were part of a divine assignment. They preserved the truth not with grand armies, but with faith. They guarded what others tried to bury, not because they were powerful in the world's eyes, but because they were trusted by heaven, and you are their descendant. That means what they carried was meant for you. What they protected through time, trials, and turmoil is now reaching your hands. Not just as a book to read, but as a confirmation of your place in something far greater than the world has allowed you to believe. The idea that you are the remnant means you were never meant to blend in. You were chosen to endure, chosen to hold on when others gave up, chosen to remain standing after the storms. That's why you still feel that pressure in your soul. That quiet knowing that you are here for more than survival, that there's something ancient in your spirit that won't let you settle. It's not arrogance. It's not imagination. It's memory, spiritual memory. Something deep inside of you remembers being connected to something holy. And the Book of Enoch whispers to that part of you that has never fully forgotten. When Enoch walked with the Most High, it wasn't just a personal journey, it was prophetic. He saw things that had not yet come to pass. He wrote about generations far beyond his own. And when he recorded visions of judgment, of righteousness, of heavenly rebellion, he wasn't writing science fiction. He was documenting spiritual realities. Realities that would shape the destiny of nations, people, and lineages. And now that book, hidden for centuries, is speaking again. It's speaking to a people who have been scattered but not lost, who have been wounded but not destroyed, who have been misnamed, mislabeled, and mistreated, but who are still here, still standing, still rising. If you've ever wondered why your journey has been so hard, why your people have carried so much pain yet kept moving forward, understand this. It's because remnants carry weight. You're not carrying just your own struggle, you're carrying a legacy, a testimony, a promise. You're the echo of those who walked through fire and refused to lose their faith. You're the evidence that what was prophesied still lives. And now with truth resurfacing, your voice is needed. Not just for your own liberation, but for the awakening of others who've been caught in the same lie that they are rejected when they are, in fact, the remnant. This is your time. This is your moment to walk in what your ancestors knew but couldn't always say out loud. To pick up what they preserved in silence. To carry forward the truth that was once hidden in caves and scrolls, now awakened in your spirit. You are not forgotten. You are not late. You are exactly where you're supposed to be. The world may not have expected you to rise, but prophecy did. Heaven did. And the Book of Enoch is just one of the many reminders that you were never cast aside. You were called for now.